But then you start thinking about what it actually takes to build a practice or grow a firm. And suddenly it can feel like you're back at the beginning because now you're not only doing the work, you're also learning how to build the business around the work. And that's where the messy middle can become very uncomfortable because building a practice is not just about being excellent at what you do. I'm Sylvia Garibaldi, founder and CEO of a well established marketing training and done for you services company, tailored specifically for the modern legal and financial professional worldwide. While it's taken some trial and error to figure out which methods get the best results for professionals who are looking to grow their practices, fast forward to today, my team and I have nailed down and perfected a process that has helped so many of our clients consistently achieve outstanding results and create a legacy for their practices. I created the Serve First, Sell Later marketing podcast to give you simple, actionable, non-salesy, and results-driven marketing to grow your legal or financial practice like so many of our clients have. If you're a lawyer, mediator, financial, or divorce professional who is looking to become highly visible and wants to create a practice that makes an impact, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 131 of the Serve First, Sell Later marketing podcast. I'm your host, Sylvia Garibaldi. And if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast by hitting the follow or subscribe button so that you don't miss future episodes packed with actionable strategies to grow your practice. So nobody talks about the hardest part of building a successful practice. What they do instead is they may talk about the success. They talk about the referrals, the better clients, the speaking opportunities, the point where their practice started to feel more consistent, more steady. And it's more about the time when their marketing finally began turning into real conversations, real opportunities. But what I find is that almost nobody talks about what happened before any of that success. They don't talk about the part where you're doing the work and wondering if any of this is actually making a difference. So they don't talk about the months where maybe you kept reaching out or doing the follow up, you improved your website, you really spent a lot of time building relationships. And so people don't talk about all of that work that led to the success that some professionals enjoy today, right? So there was no flood of calls, there was no big breakthrough. And I think that's the part that I want to talk about today because I've been doing this work for many years now. And I've had the honor and privilege of working with hundreds of very successful lawyers, mediators, divorce professionals, financial professionals, and other trust based experts. And the one thing I've noticed is that almost every successful practice goes through this stage, and it's the uncomfortable stage, it's the uncertain stage. It's what I call the messy middle, okay? And it's the part between saying, let's try this, and then finally being able to say, I'm really glad I did it. And the messy middle is not just about marketing, like posting on social media or getting clearer on who you serve. It also has to do with the entire experience of growing a practice, which could mean a better intake process, improving the client customer experience, and making sure that people understand what you do and when to come to you, right? So it's learning how to ask for the conversation, the referral, the introduction, or the business. And quite honestly, this is where a lot of professionals start questioning themselves and they start wondering about, should I keep going? Is this working? Is this worth my time? This feels awkward. It feels very slow. So, all of these things. But that doesn't mean it's not working. It simply means you're in the part of the process that most people don't talk about. Okay. I hope that's making sense. So, in today's episode, I want to talk about what the messy middle really looks like. Because if you're a professional and you've been doing this work, but you're not seeing the results that you hoped for, then this episode is really for you. I want you to understand that the messy middle is not something to fear, and it's certainly not a sign that you're behind. It's really all about what you need to be doing next. So, when I talk about the messy middle, this is what I mean. It's the part that I mentioned already that is, let's try this. And then eventually you get the, I'm so glad I did, right? It's the part where you've made the decision to take your marketing more seriously, maybe taking a look at your practice and some of the measures within your practice. And you're in the beginning process. And so when you're in the beginning, it can feel exciting. You feel like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm really putting myself out there. I've made improvements to my business. And so then a few weeks go by, a few months go by, and this is where the messy middle starts to show up. Okay. Because now you're doing the work, but you're not necessarily seeing the proof yet. And so you don't have a line of people waiting to hire you. You don't have every post turning into a consultation. And I think this is when most people start to feel uncomfortable and they start to wonder about the entire process. But what successful professionals notice and know about, because when we work with them, we've seen this time and time again. And it's simply that knowing that the messy middle is not a sign that something is wrong. It's actually a stage that you have to pass through before the results become visible. Because growth doesn't usually happen in one dramatic moment. It happens quietly. It happens every day through all of those actions that you take every single day. It's the follow up that plants a seed. It's the webinar attendee who didn't book a call today, but remembers you months later and calls you up and says, we need to talk. That's the messy middle, right? And it doesn't always look impressive while it's happening. And it certainly doesn't feel rewarding, but it's where so much of the real work gets done. And it's where you start becoming known for something. It's where people begin to associate you with a specific problem that they may need help with. So that's super important to understand, because once you understand this, you're less likely to panic when you're in it, right? You're less likely to quit too early. Now, I think this stage is particularly hard for high performers, and that includes a lot of lawyers, mediators, arbitrators, other trust based professionals that are listening to this podcast right now, because you're used to being very good at what you do. You know you're the expert. And you're used to people coming to you because you know how to help them. You know your process. You understand conflict. You understand people. You understand negotiation. And as I said, you certainly have the experience, you have the training, and you have the years behind you. But then you start thinking about what it actually takes to build a practice or grow a firm. And suddenly it can feel like you're back at the beginning, because now you're not only doing the work, you're also learning how to build the business around the work. And that's where the messy middle can become very uncomfortable, because building a practice is not just about being excellent at what you do. It's also being visible. It's being clear about who you help. And it's taking all those steps in between. And so for a lot of professionals, that feels very different from the actual work that they do with clients. So anything that you do to build your business that may not actually involve a conversation with your client, that feels out of your comfort zone, that's the messy middle. And you may feel very confident in the courtroom or the mediation room or in the room with your clients. And you may be very confident helping them through the complexities of the work that you do. But then someone says, okay, now let's talk about how people actually find you. How do they remember you? How do they refer to you? How do we improve this client intake process? And suddenly it feels uncomfortable, right? Or let's follow up with the people that you already know. And then suddenly you worry about bothering them because it feels like you shouldn't be pursuing them. Or someone says, let's look at your intake process because it looks like you may be losing clients at this part of the process. And then you start to wonder, well, should I really be doing this? And once again, that's when you know you're in the messy middle, because it brings up things that have nothing to do with your actual ability to serve clients. It brings up self-doubt. It brings up discomfort. the fear of asking, right? How many of you have that fear of asking? The fear of following up, the fear of being known for something specific. And when I work with some of the most successful professionals, what I notice is that they too struggled at this stage, right? Not because they're not good at what they do and not because they don't care about their clients, right? It's because building a practice asks something different of you. It asks you to be seen before you completely feel comfortable being seen, for example. So it asks you to do things that are not necessarily easy for you to do. And especially when you built your career around being careful, thoughtful, prepared, and professional, it's tough, it's difficult. And a lot of these areas can make you feel exposed. But the top professionals that I've worked with, some of them have already gone through these stages. Some of them are going through that stage as they work with us. But it's definitely something that I have identified when working with them, that the messy middle of all those things that I just talked about does make them feel pretty uncomfortable. And they feel less certain because there are no guaranteed rules about what's going to work and what may not work. So, for people who are used to performing at a high level, that can be frustrating, right? Very frustrating for them because they want to know, what should I say exactly? Who should I reach out to? How long should I be following up? What if I put myself out there and nothing happens? So, what's happening here is you're really learning how to do things in a different way. And you need to understand that doing this takes practice. So, for example, the first few improvements that you'd make to your intake process may feel like small things, right? But none of that means the effort is wasted. It means you're learning. There was a time when you were learning your profession too. And there was a time when things that feel automatic now didn't feel automatic, right? Think about that. I want to share something with you that I see come up time and time again. Many professionals I speak to know exactly who they want to attract, but where things break down isn't clarity, it's actually implementation. So they're not sure how to translate that into messaging, how to stay visible, or how to turn that visibility into actual client inquiries. So if this sounds familiar, I created a step by step guide to help you work right through this. This free guide walks you through how to define your ideal clients, identify the right referral partners, understand where they're actually looking, including AI, and most importantly, how to turn all of that into consistent action. You can download your free guide at www.sgandassociates.ca/free-guide. Link is also in the show notes. And there was a time when you had to build confidence through repetition. So even the skills that you learn as a practitioner, think about how often you had to repeat those activities in order to become really good at that. So here's my message to you. Building a practice is no different. You don't become comfortable by waiting until you feel ready. You become more comfortable by doing the work and by refining it as you go. And so having those conversations, doing the follow-up, paying attention to what lands with referral partners and prospects and clients, improving the client experience, giving yourself permission to be in the learning stage. And that's why the messy middle matters. You want to be in the messy middle. You have to pass through the messy middle because this is where you start moving from being the best kept secret to becoming someone that people actually know, remember, trust, and choose. But first, you have to be willing to go through that uncomfortable stage. And that's going to happen even when you're not fully confident. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're behind. It doesn't mean that you're failing. It doesn't mean that the strategy isn't working. That's an important message that I hope is resonating with you. It simply means that you're doing something that matters before it feels natural. Now, here's another place where the messy middle gets a bit tricky because this is usually the stage where I see people starting to panic, right? They've decided to grow their practice. They're doing all the things that they need to do from a marketing and business development point of view. And after a while, they start wondering, hey, is this working? Should I be doing something else? Maybe I should try a different platform. Or I just heard or read about this really great idea. Should I be implementing that? But building a practice doesn't usually work that way. So, this is where the right guidance really matters. And it could be a marketing professional, a business development advisor, because the right person is not just there to tell you to post more. They're there to help you understand what stage you're in. And that matters. Let me tell you, that matters because not every professional needs the same thing. And you may run into marketing and business development professionals that don't have a lot of experience and may misguide you. And for some of you, you may have experienced that. So it's important to make sure that you're following the guidance of someone that's been in the trenches for a while and that you can relate to the things that they're talking about. So, someone who is not well known may need more visibility, for example, or someone who is known but not for the right thing may need clearer positioning. See the difference? Someone with a strong referral network may need better follow up, but may not need more leads. So, it all depends on what stage you're at and what type of initiative you're going to need next to help you with the next step. So you may need more focus, or maybe you need to send an email campaign to the right audience. So doing what someone else is doing because you see that your competitor is doing it is not always the answer, right? You may need to be doing specific things based on where you are in your business right now that are going to be different from perhaps your competitor. So it's important to really get assessed by a professional, a marketing or business development professional that can tell you where you are right now and what's going to help you get to that next stage, because it's not the same for everyone. So in the messy middle, I think one of the most important things you can do is actually slow down before you change direction. Look at the strategy, consult with a marketing or business development professional. Look at the analytics, look at the evidence. Have someone look at your whole practice. They should be looking at your message, your visibility, your relationships, your follow up, your intake, your capacity, your goals, all of these things, because growth is rarely about one thing. It's usually about many things working together. And so that's why trusting the right guidance matters. And that trust comes from knowing that there is a strategy behind the actions. And, I can tell you from experience that in having so many conversations with prospects and clients, and some people are set on engaging with a particular strategy, whether it makes sense or not. And I have those conversations daily with so many different professionals, and I just sit and I listen. And it's important to note that you can't follow every strategy out there because you feel that's the right thing to do and you see that your competitors are doing that. And unfortunately, sometimes I have some uncomfortable discussions with clients to let them know that this may not be the right approach based on what we're seeing. And so this is where trusted guidance is so important. So the goal here is to do the right things in the right order for the practice that you're actually trying to build. So, what does the messy middle actually require, right? I think that's an important question to ask because it's one thing to understand, it's another to stay in it long enough for the work to actually matter. And I think there are a few things that really help. The first is patience. And I don't mean sitting back and waiting for something to happen. I mean active patience, right? You're still doing the work, you're still showing up, you're doing the follow up, you're being very conscientious about building relationships. You're still improving your messaging, your website, your intake process, your client experience, and the way people understand what you do. But you're not expecting every single action to turn into an immediate result. That's active patience, right? The second thing is strategic consistency. I talk about consistency a lot. Why? Because it matters. Full stop. Not random consistency, not posting just to post, not reaching out to anyone and everyone. Strategic consistency means you know who you're trying to reach and you know what you want to be known for, and you know that those relationships matter, right? And you keep showing up around that. I hope that makes sense. The third thing is willingness to ask. And boy, oh boy, this is a hard one. And I have a lot of conversations with professionals around this, and I can hear the stories. I can hear the uncomfortableness to ask for help, to ask for a referral, to ask for the business. And this is a tough nut to crack. And it really means, doing the things that are hard to do, like asking for that introduction, asking for that testimonial, asking someone to maybe attend your webinar. And I think that that is a real obstacle. So, what I think is important to take away here is that serving first doesn't mean never asking. Okay. It means the ask comes from a place of value, trust, and relevance. And I think that's the distinction. The fourth thing is guidance, because when you're in the messy middle, it can be hard to see what's actually happening. You may think nothing's working, but maybe the message just needs to be clearer. Maybe you think you need more marketing. You may think you need to do everything, but maybe what you really need is just focus. And that's why the right guidance matters. So once again, whether that's a marketing professional, someone who understands and has the experience to help you understand what it takes to build a stronger, more resilient practice. And you need someone who can help you look at the whole picture and make smart adjustments instead of panic decisions. The fifth thing is trust in the process. And I don't mean blind trust, I mean informed trust. So trust that says, we have a strategy, we're paying attention, we're reviewing it, we're looking at the analytics, we're adjusting, but we're not going to abandon the whole thing just because it feels uncomfortable. And that's why a lot of our clients turn to us for accountability, because it's so easy to say, I'm not going to do this initiative because I just don't think it makes sense. And yet they're almost a quarter the way to the finish line, right? So it's important not to abandon it and to have a professional there who can provide guidance on when it's best to continue and when it's best to maybe abandon it. Okay. And this part can feel slow and it can make you question yourself, but that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Okay. Sometimes it means you're finally doing the work that's building a real practice. And I think that's important to understand. And so the work of becoming someone that people remember, refer, and choose, and that kind of growth that takes time, it takes repetition, it takes focus, and it really takes the willingness to keep going before the results are obvious. So if you're in the messy middle right now, I want you to take this with you. Just because it feels quiet, it doesn't mean nothing is happening. Just because the results aren't obvious quite yet, it doesn't mean that the work isn't starting to matter or to make a difference. And just because you're uncomfortable, it doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. Sometimes what we find is that uncomfortable stage is actually the stage where things are beginning to shift. And that's what a lot of top professionals experience all the time. And they're willing to go through the uncomfortable stage to get to the end result. So super important. The messy middle is not the glamorous part of growth. It's not the part people usually talk about later, but it may be one of the most important parts in my experience in working with some very successful professionals, because this is where you build the foundation. This is where you keep showing up before proof is obvious. So don't be too quick to dismiss the quietness, and don't be too quick to assume nothing is working. This may just be a sign that you may be in the messy middle. And let's just put it this way. The middle is not the end of the story. It's often the part that makes the ending possible and all those goals achievable. Thanks for tuning in today. And if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss a future episode. I'll see you soon.